Welcome back to another episode of the Canon on the Booming Bus channel. I'm your host Terry, and today doing my initial reaction for The Flash. It's been a minute. But I'm back, and we're gonna start doing some more stuff. It's been a minute, just like this movie took a long time to come out. Finally, we have saw today. So I just saw it earlier today. A lot of hype around this movie. A lot of people coming out, a lot of big profile names coming out and saying how great it was. And it's one that I've been excited for. I think this has some of the best trailers I've seen in a while. So, anyway, comes out in the middle of all the controversy and everything. And we finally got it. So, for me, again, initial reaction, I like to see it 2 times to give a full review. But after my first time, it's gonna be light spoilers again. I don't do non-spoiler, so be prepared if you haven't saw it. All right, so I am going to talk in non-spoiler terms in the beginning, just to talk about the different things in terms of story and all that. So I think for me, when I reflect on this movie, the story's fine. I think, and I don't mean fine, I mean the story's good. But the story is not the exact same story, but it's the same concept from the Flashpoint comic book. So you already knew the story would be solid. This idea that for whatever reason, Barry decides to go back and make it where he saves his mom and she doesn't die, and then having that affect everything and changing the whole course of history, and him having to figure out how to fix it. Now, it's been done in a few ways. Obviously, most famously, again, in the comic books with some huge stakes. But in this one, it's not so huge of stakes. It's a very different story. But again, the concept is still there, that Barry has to figure out, not only he has to come to the conclusion that he can't save his mom, but then he has to figure out how to fix what he messed up. So that is already solid. Now, the screenplay itself, that's where I was disappointed. When you're just talking about the scenes they wrote, not necessarily the dialogue all the time, but just the scene selection, the stuff they chose not to cut out, the stuff they chose to spend time doing, it was disappointing. And then the editing as well, which is weird because this movie is a little bit all over the place, because there's times, especially I think, when you get to the part where they have Supergirl. This is like the third act of the movie, pretty much. Well, kind of like second act. That is when I feel like the editing was a little crisper. Like typically, you'll have some shots that people just sit on, and you like, bro, you could have cut. We could have just boom cut to the next thing they doing. We don't have to see this, and they did that really well in the later part of the movie. But in the beginning, especially with everything with just Barry being Barry, they really let those scenes play out longer than I think they should. And some of the jokes weren't funny. There was some good humor in it, but it really went more goofy funny than I thought it would be, especially when you consider, I believe it was that second full trailer, the one that really hit hard, where it conveyed this story of like gravity, this story about him trying to save his mom and really coming to grips with his past, and those kindred spirits he have with Batman because of his parents, and just all of that. And all of that is in the movie, but it's in moments of the movie. I thought that would be the movie. And I know I tend, when I talk, to sound like I want something more grounded, more, dramatic. And I don't necessarily think that's true. There's movies that are action packed or more funny that I absolutely love, and I think it works for that story. For this story, I just don't think it worked too well. Like, they had some good stuff in the beginning, but you had the perfect scenario with younger Barry, who is not only younger, he's completely different than our Barry, because he grew up with his parents. He didn't have any of that trauma. And so you had the perfect opportunity to do some jokes with him to keep it light. But they went overboard, in my opinion. And it was just weird. It wasn't even like truly funny. So some of it was just weird. And I remember thinking like James Gunn loved this movie, says the best comic book movie ever, and I couldn't help but think that's because some of this is his style of comedy, is his style of just being weird, and I didn't like it. It was like some of the design choices, some of the jokes, some of the scenes, like some of the way the characters acted. It was just that weird James Gunn humor. So I'm sure he did love it, but James Gunn, for the most part, don't like his stuff, but I think Peacemaker as a whole, he struck a good balance. But a lot of times I think he goes overboard, like Guardians 3. I'm not a big fan, but I know people are. So anyway, if you like James Gunn type stuff, you're going to get that feeling a lot. But then you do get the good action, which is kind of standard for the superhero part. But like I said, you do get that drama as well. And you get it three ways because you see something in Bruce Wayne, or Keaton's Bruce Wayne, who is trying to reconnect back to what he was. And it's not a lot, but you get it. And then you get Kara, who I thought that actress was amazing. Just being, I mean, she isn't super dimensional, multi-dimensional in this movie. Just she didn't have to be, but she does give rage and emotion really well. And I thought some of her scenes landed pretty nicely. So you had that, and then of course you got Barry and his trauma and what he's dealing with. And there's some moments where they let Ezra cook and it goes. But I couldn't help but thinking, now, I mean, now that I saw the rest of the movie, it makes a little sense, but I couldn't help but think one part of this movie that's not a huge spoiler, but it really summarizes what I feel about this movie. There's the part that we see in the trailer where they show up to the final battle or whatever. And so you have obviously the two Flashes trying to fight for what they got to do. You got Batman that's just here to help, and then you got Kara facing off with Zod because of the stuff that he's doing. And it's a perfect moment for you to put in a score, you know, some piano, some whatever, like something that Nolan would do to really raise the emotion and the tension of the moment, you know, because it's kind of, not a montage, but they kind of do that thing where they cut back to everybody's fight and it's like go time. And instead of doing that, they do some rock and roll song. And I like the first Suicide Squad, David Ayer, but that's kind of the mistake they leaned into. And then again, that's something that James Gunn would do. And I just don't think it fit that moment in the movie for what we build up to. We didn't need a rock and roll action packs, you know, montage. We needed to see, I wouldn't say people having catharsis or anything, but we wanted to see these characters kind of embody the emotion that they're feeling and really trying to fight to save something or to get revenge on something. And they just didn't do it. And for me, that's the whole movie, where there's just times where they zigged hard where I think they should have zagged. And that's just, obviously that's my own personal preference, but performance wise, like I said, story wise, it was solid. The editing, the screenplay, not my favorite. Some of the choices with the direction, not my favorite. The performances were strong. I'd probably even say great. And the emotional moments did well. And there was some good comedy, even though they take it a little bit too far. And yeah, some of the editing choices were just weird to me. So overall, I just felt like it was a undercooked movie. Like it's got a lot of good parts to it. Might be seasoned up well. Might have some good grill marks or whatever. It's summertime, so forgive me. But once you cut into and you get into it, it's not fully cooked. The idea was there, but they didn't fully cook it. And it makes sense with the drama that happened, plus DC rebooting, despite whatever they say they rebooting. So they didn't want to put extra resources into it. And you could feel it. You could feel it. One thing that's going to be a lot of talk is the CGI. And there are times where not only is it really bad, but it's just unnecessary to me. I just feel like you could have really used the actual person to do some of these shots where they're just static. It's, you know, if they're jumping up a building and stuff, obviously you can't do that. But when they're just standing there, I feel like you could have used a real person. And they do a lot of just random moments of CGI that I feel like weren't necessary. But then the CGI is terrible, so it makes it even worse. And there's one part in the Speed Force where there's going to be a debate. Should it look, is it supposed to look like that? And to me, the answer doesn't matter because there's parts that's not in the Speed Force that has the same quality of CGI and it looks bad. So I just don't think they gave them the resources to fully cook this. But yeah, I'm not gonna give it a grade or anything. Like I said, I do think it's fun. There's some parts that's really fun, particularly in the beginning. But as the movie goes on, it's just kind of all over the place for me. So anyway, go down comment section. Let me know what you think. Share around, get the conversation started. Thumbs up, subscribe, and if you heard it here, it's official canon.